Um, yes, so this is a test stream. I don't, yeah, so this is a test stream, and the title of the stream is I want to make a mechanical caterpillar. And uh, and yeah, I think I'll just take a minute or so to I'll just take a minute or so to get other things figured out, and then we'll start with the stream. So, to not bore you, why am I making this caterpillar? Just for fun. I actually have a bigger project in mind, but I think for now I'll just make the caterpillar. And what would we do in this stream? What would we do in this stream? So yeah, I have I have used quite a few CAD softwares throughout the years, and I think I would like to compare them, uh, not in terms of I'll be using different CAD softwares on the stream, but I'll be using FreeCAD and would be comparing FreeCAD to the alternatives that are present, to the paid alternatives that are present, and mostly all the alternatives are paid. Um, so we will see how FreeCAD fares amongst those paid alternatives. And also I think I have to put my laptop on charge. Yeah. So what are the pitfalls for a free and open source software, and why do you think softwares like Fusion and Onshape have taken the market? One of the reasons is that they heavily sponsor um, these YouTubers and content creators to use their software, and most of the hobbyists are looking most of the hobbyists are watching them, and they think that if it's good enough for them, it should be good enough for me. So I have not used FreeCAD all that much. I have planned this stream, so I know that I won't be um, so I know that I won't be looking too stupid using it. So that's one thing. Other than that, I don't think so. I still don't know how to use assemblies in FreeCAD, and other things. So let's start the stream. So firstly, this was one sketch I made, and as you can see, these are just blocks. Just a minute. Yeah, so these are just blocks which will be connected somehow, and it'll be a mechanical caterpillar, and we'll figure out a mechanism on how to move it. Now, for how caterpillar moves is pretty simple. This is what I would also want. I don't think it will be as flawless as this one, but I'll take some inspiration and see where I can have some creative liberty. And the mechanism which I plan to use is a simple one, in which I think all of us has made some at some point in our lives. Yep. So um, I'll be making something like this for the mechanism, and jumping on to FreeCAD. Jumping on to FreeCAD, what I want to explore is how we make these mechanisms and how we test these mechanisms in the sketch of in the sketch part of the program. Now, if you are not familiar with any CAD softwares, I think this will be a really good starting point, because the first thing you need to learn is how to make a sketch, and then how to uh, make then how to how would I put it, how do you extrude a solid body out of a sketch, or how do you extrude a surface body out of a sketch. But in mostly all CAD softwares, the sketch comes first. So let's try replicating that mechanism in a sketch. uh, that being said that being said uh, let's also that being said, you can make a lot of mechanisms in sketch, but those mechanisms are mostly rigid mechanisms, so they don't have any flexible parts to it. Now, in this, um, you can clearly see that this guy uses a string to join the loops and whatnot, and you cannot simulate a string inside a sketch. So we'll take some creative liberty and oh, we'll take some creative liberty to see how we can do that. Other than that, I think we'll also talk about the the user interface of FreeCAD, and I changed it a little bit to my liking, but it is mostly stock. So we'll talk about the user interface and why that could be one thing you that stops people from migrating from one CAD software to another. That could be one thing that still hooks people to paid softwares like Fusion 360 and Onshape, which are not completely paid, but they are not completely free either. But it's still stopping them from using a completely free software like FreeCAD. Now, this is also my first time, not my first time, but I have used it a very a tiny bit. So this is also my experience with FreeCAD, and I would be commenting about the user interface and whatnot. I think I have sufficient CAD experience from college and professional life uh, to see where are they making any serious mistakes in their approach of designing software, or it's just people's opinions on what's good and not. So okay, let's get started. So if we see my initial sketch, I have made it out of blocks. So let's make a 2D representation of these blocks, and we'll see how we can make them move with a string. Okay, I also just figured out It's hard to talk non-stop, so I would need I would need some help there. Okay, so firstly I can make few rectangles, and let's say these rectangles are the different segments of the caterpillar, but these rectangles have to, bend in certain way. But when you create rectangles from the default rectangle tool, and I think in any CAD software they have certain constraints which they apply to those rectangles. Let me just delete this for simplicity. And now you see uh, FreeCAD actually gives a window where all of the constraints are laid out for you. So these are coincident constraints, which are basically these two lines are joined at this point right here. So there are four of these because there are four vertices in a quadrilateral, and they also have these horizontal and vertical constraints, because of which I I cannot rotate this geometry, because this line will never not be vertical and this line will never not be horizontal. So let's start by deleting these constraints. Also, just naming them constraint 1. If I add another constraint, it will be constraint 5. So it's all, I already know it's constraint, so I think they could have used this space a little better. But anyway, now you see I cannot rotate it, but I can skew it, because um, you need to define this as a rectangle. Currently nothing is defining it as a rectangle which with sides, um, of with sides which have an angle 90 degrees in between them. So if I do that, let's say this is the perpendicular constraint, and if I do this here as well, and here, yeah, I don't think I need to do it here, but now it's a rectangle now, and I can rotate it, but currently the length and breadth of the rectangle is not defined. So let's do that next. um, and yeah, this is also one interesting way in which these CAD softwares define length of a line segment. So you see how it goes from being straight to being the same angle as this line. So it is just defining the vector in which it will define the length. So let's say I define the length on the x-axis. So you see that the line is at an angle, but the length is defined completely horizontal in parallel with the x-axis. And if I now try to move this, yep, you see how this is quite long, but the distance between these 2 points with respect to the vector of the x-axis is always 32.15. But that's not what we want. We want to define this line along the vector of that line itself. So we define that as 30 and this as 20. Now if we try to rotate it, we can rotate it like a normal rectangle. I mean, this is how a normal rectangle would behave. So this rectangle is currently defined, but it's not fully defined. And what fully defined sketches are is basically that you won't be able to just move it by clicking on it and dragging it. Every aspect of that sketch is defined. So currently the rectangle is defined, but it is not defined the within the boundaries of this sketch. So let's give it some definition. Firstly, I'll give it an angle with respect to the y-axis, and then I'll give it some position with respect to both the x and y-axis. And one thing you might have noticed or missed, but uh, the lines of the rectangle are now green rather than black. I'll just do an undo, which will, yeah, so it is not fully defined. I can still move it in this direction, not in any other direction, but move it along the x-axis. So it is not fully defined, and you can see that by looking at the color of the lines. Now every CAD software does it differently, and when I say does it differently, I mean the color scheme of these dimensions, the lines and the axis are a bit different, but the principle of every CAD software on how to define sketches are the same. So yeah, now it's fully defined. And for making a caterpillar, we don't want this segment fully defined because we would be rotating it um, like we had in this image. So let's make two other rectangles for the demonstration, and let's give them dimensions. I don't like how it, the snapping of where the snapping of which axis it has to take to give the dimension is um, I don't know, something just seems off. I have seen other softwares do it better, so I think that's one area where they can improve a little bit. Yeah, this one is defined. You see what I'm talking about? They don't I don't think you can notice it on stream, but if you have used a few different CAD softwares, you would know the snapping of when it goes from, you know, when it changes vectors like this, and it's a little off. Yep, let's say these are the three segments, and in the last segment there'll be a motor with a string attached to it, and that string will go through the last segment to the middle to the first segment, and it'll pull on the first segment. So before we make the strings, I think we should make the hinges that would be here. In the cardboard arm, the hinges are just bent cardboard between the straws. And how do we make hinges in how do we make hinges in a sketch where you're just testing your mechanism out? Now uh, one easy way could just be, right, you put a put a line segment in between it, and it can act like sort of a hinge. You can give it wait, you can give it a few constraints. But they don't work, they don't work as well. And if I try to give the same constraints here, I mean they sort of work. We can use this as well, but I found um, I don't know what should I call it. I found a more complicated way to do it, which was a bit more fun. So I first make a circle and make it tangent to these lines, and I then put some line segments. You see what the issue I was talking about? It snaps very irregularly. Yep. So this is a better hinge than that. I didn't define that, the one line segment, properly. It could have been better, but I just find this to be a bit better than that line segment. And also, while I was testing this thing out uh, before doing the stream, this worked better than just a line joining these two. So we'll do the same thing what we did here over here. Do I even have let me check. I don't think so I have viewers, because with what I have like 20 subscribers. How, why would I? Yeah. How come it has views one? Okay, I think that, okay, that must be me when I checked. Okay, so it's been 25 minutes. Let's finish it off in 10 15 more minutes. Okay, I'll be talking, I think, a little less for 5 minutes. I wish I had some arrangement for background music so it doesn't sound it doesn't sound this empty when I'm. This will be the string. So like I can make a curved line, but you know I don't know how I didn't test how I'd be able to manipulate this into a mechanism. So I'll just try to do it with straight lines. So if you just see that this created this angle while I was creating the line, so you have to be a little careful about these things, and I would have to delete this constraint now so that it doesn't affect us down the line. Yeah, so I'm keeping this part as the rigid part, and these two blocks are the ones which are gonna move in this experiment. So and this is also just a way to make this line segment act more like a string. It's just one constraint, so that I don't know really how to explain it, but it's mostly for this line segment to act like a string. Okay, so after hiding all the constraints, you can see if I pull the string here, it sort of bends. Also, you see the middle thing, it is going out of the box, but the thing is, if we run this mechanism backwards, like if we do this, it works better. It works much better than when we are pulling it from here. Now that would not happen with a string. um, I think it's, yeah. But you see, this is how you can test mechanisms in Sketch before you even build other things around it. So this is one way, and you usually do not test mechanisms with uh, yeah, so you usually do not test mechanisms with a semi-rigid body like a string or a wire in it, because you just have to do things to get around, uh, make your way to test it, rather than because there's no native support for these kind of things. But if you're using if you're making a mechanism that is all rigid parts, and it's mostly a two-dimensional mechanism that can fit on a plane, I think sketches are a great way to test out those mechanisms. So yep, that was it from my side. I think that mm, for me, using FreeCAD, I think I don't have much criticisms other than look at how these lines and these lines are the same weight. I uh, tried to change it, but they don't have the option to change that, don't have the option to customize it. So if you are from FreeCAD, if you're watching this stream and if you're from FreeCAD, so you can maybe do an update on this. Also, Like, I know it is a constraint panel. I don't need to know that. I don't need to know after every constraint it's a constraint. So I think this is something you can do better at. um, you can customize the color scheme, but I think the default color scheme is fine. I think it's the line weights which are more of an issue, because I have seen sketches look not this cluttered even with this amount of dimensions and constraints. So yeah, next time maybe I'll do a stream. I think I won't do such a basic stream where I'm going to tell you how you make a sketch. I think in the background I'll have a few things already sorted out, and there would be some progress in this project. So yeah, I think I'm talking a lot for someone who doesn't even know how many people are gonna, uh, if people are gonna watch the stream or not. So I'll I'll leave you guys to it. If you're watching, then bye bye. Take care.